I see. Well, I mean, aren't you happy with the way things are?
Yeah, I am, but isn't it okay to wonder?
Sure it is,
Well, we all wonder about things in our lives.
Yeah. Like I wonder about the time when I stepped out in front of this Trailways bus, you know? Must have been doing about 60 miles an hour. And if I didn't step back just in time, always wonder what I'd been like.
No different.
I just wanted to let you know about my study group.
Oh, don't be a fuddy-duddy. I'll be your study buddy.
I'm about to embark on one of the great challenges of my scientific career.
This work right here is going to change history.
I think this is going to be our greatest mission.
I don't have time to study. I'll never get into Stanford.
I got big plans for you tonight. I got maps, I got charts. I'm going to see you through this because my credibility is on the line.
It's at this point that you'll want to start taking notes.
Welcome to the Sitcom Study, the podcast where we contemplate the TV shows we grew up with and search for the truth and wisdom within the tropes and cliches. And Amy, what are we talking about today?
Well, we'll have to roll a dice and find out, Jay.
Explain.
We could be talking about so many things. There are multiple different timelines and multiple universes in which we talk about different things on today's podcast.
The madness of the multiverse, yes. Alternate timelines, scenarios in which characters are somehow presented with some alternate version of their lives, or sometimes when we, the audience, are presented with an alternate version of things. Yeah, this is a really fun one. This reminds me of what we talked about just a few weeks back with The Christmas Carol, and the reason why that was such an enduring story that gets adapted 1,000,001 times. That one isn't quite alternate timelines. It's more of like jumping around in history
future,
and perspectives. Yeah, and then It's a Wonderful Life has more specifically the like alternate timeline sort of version
like you not
of that.
Existing.
Yeah, but these things come back again and again in all forms of storytelling, because I think it's both fantastical, you know, this idea of getting to somehow hop into a different timeline or something is something that is simply impossible in real life, and yet at well, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that as far as we know, and yet at the same time it's sort of universal, because we all have that notion, you know, of like, oh, I wonder if there's a world where this happened instead of that happened, or even just within our own lives thinking about the different turning points. So that's what I'm going to ask you. Is this something that you've pondered throughout your life? Do you have certain sort of like nexus points where you go like, oh, you know, if that were different, maybe I would have a whole different life, or I'd be living in a whole different world? Is that a resonant thing for you, or that's just something you've never considered?
Well, so I definitely have thought about and do think about like, you know, parallel dimensions, like the idea of a parallel universe or a parallel dimension. To me, there's really something to that. I find that aspect of sci-fi really interesting. When the whole Marvel movie universe like introduced this idea of like the actual character existing across multiple universes, I thought that was kind of interesting. I think, you know, they're doing it in a superhero way. I think it's more interesting to think about in like what is it like in real time, and
that
like in
version
real life.
Of the multiverse makes even the other versions seem more plausible. Their version is like, oh, there's a world in which this same guy looks like Andrew Garfield instead of Tobey Maguire or something. That's not what we're talking about.
Well, and that's like kind of a twist on what they've done in the other ones, where like Doctor Strange just always looks like Doctor Strange, but it's like a different version of him. And you've got like, you know, alcoholic Thor in one version.
Yeah. Well, no, to their credit, I think the Marvel movies, it's very clever and fun the way they've taken the real life drama of the different corporations and the different iterations of these characters. Yeah, and sort of worked that into this idea of the multiverse. Oh, it's a different dimension where the Sony Pictures Spider-Man, you know, hangs out instead of the Tom Holland one.
And there was this show called Fringe that starred, it was an hour-long drama. It starred Pacey from Dawson's Creek. And that was all about this sort of like parallel dimension.
Sliders, too. Wasn't that similar thing?
I think so. And then, of course, Butterfly Effect, which is like the scary
Ashton
movie.
Kutcher
Ashton Kutcher movie. So, you know, I mean, look, I definitely have thought about it. I I like the idea of a parallel universe or a parallel dimension, like I said, really resonates with me. I think there is definitely something to it if you're going into like, you know, thinking about quantum physics and the way that matter works and doesn't work. You know, I could go real nerdy on that stuff, but I think there is something to that. There is like the opposite of matter is the antimatter, and those things, you know, there's a balance of each of them. Anyway, whatever, totally nerdy. But so I think, yeah, and I've thought a lot about it from that aspect. But to the kind of other part of your question, which is like, have you sat around and been like, oh, this was a nexus point if I had just made this other decision? You know, yeah, every time somebody asks me a question like that, I always have to like take a moment and reflect, because it's not that I don't like have regrets and think about what ifs. Everybody does, but I'm generally the type of person that like once I've made a decision, that is my decision, and I am good and happy with it. And there is no more like going back and being like, oh man, and kind of like, you know, flogging myself for not choosing the other path and what if. So, you know, yes to one part and kind of no in a braggy way to the other part.
No, that's great. It's funny how we approach it from the opposite points of view, like the scientific side of it. And that's why I was pretty cavalier about saying, yeah, this is all fantastical, because to me, it's not that I don't think that there is a basis of science in these things, but they're so theoretical that for all intents and purposes, from my point of view as an everyday schmo, it is pure fantasy. Whereas I do get very hung up on the human aspect of it. And for years, I was a little obsessed with the idea of, you know, for me, it was specifically my college decisions.
Right.
You know, I got into the NYU Tisch School of the Arts, but I couldn't afford to go. And I didn't really understand at that time the difference between, you know, a film program at NYU versus the state college I went to, SUNY Binghamton. And, you know, throughout my young adulthood, I kind of blamed, you know, the way my life turned out, and having this sort of what I considered a lackluster professional life. You know, I really kind of blamed it on that specific nexus point. And even on the personal side of things, the fact that in college, I had this long distance relationship with this girl that didn't go to my college. And so that kept me from transferring to other schools that were farther away. And it kept me from sort of like sowing my wild oats and learning how to mac on girls and bars and stuff. And yeah, for a lot of my 20s and 30s, I did sort of have this notion, you know, one of the recent examples of this in the movies is Everything Everywhere All at Once, about these people that run a laundromat, but there's some version of reality where they're Hollywood movie stars.
Yes.
And that was me, you know, oh, if I had only figured out a way to go to NYU, or maybe if I shouldn't have, you know, dated that one girl all those years and messed around a little more. And I think I learned the same conclusion that some of the characters in these shows do, that like, yeah, who knows? Like maybe your life would be better. But at the same time, we all have certain innate characteristics that do sort of shape the overall trajectory of our lives. And they get mixed up with all the random chance things. And so, sure, there's a world in which I was, you know, the next Stanley Kubrick, but then there's also a world where I got hit by the bus before my 19th birthday. And so, you know, you gotta have a little bit of gratitude for like the way things worked out. They're usually not so bad. So yeah, okay, lots of philosophical stuff going into this. What were our shows? What did we watch?
We watched My Two Dads, Season 2, Episode 10, In Her Dreams, Malcolm in the Middle, Season 2, Episode 20, Bowling, Scrubs, Season 3, Episode 16, My Butterfly, and Community, Season 3, Episode 4, Remedial Chaos Theory.
Yeah, so we're skewing fairly recent on this podcast, which means this is one of the rare times where we only have one multi-camera sitcom. So we're kind of out of our comfort zone. I noticed that immediately when we're only on our second show, and we're already swishing between the little cutaway jokes, and you know we're in that cinematic late 90s.
Yeah, because the
vibe.
My Two Dads is like 87, I think, and then we do a big jump. Malcolm in the Middle is 2001, and Scrubs is 2003, and Community's 2011.
Yeah, and look, it's not as though things like this didn't exist exist in the earlier shows, but I think the later ones do kind of have fun with it for some of the reasons that we're saying. This idea comes up in the movies, and then the shows start to absorb that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, My Two Dads, I think this is our first time covering it, right?
Is it really?
I believe we watched together the pilot for fun, but I don't think we've ever covered My Two Dads.
Was this one that you watched?
I don't know if I watched this a ton when it came out, but I was definitely familiar with it. And I think I remember watching this in reruns in college.
Oh, that's
and kind
funny.
of getting a kick out of it.
Yeah.
I think that Paul Reiser is a big selling point to me. He's just got a natural, you
love those nebbishy guys.
Yeah, I was just going to say, he's like the poor man's Woody Allen, but much less controversial.
Oh, God, please.
And there's something, he brought a natural appeal, his sort of sleepy persona. And if anything, I remember liking this back in the day in a sort of corny, innocent way. And then I think when we watched the pilot recently, we were kind of like, oh, this is maybe not that good.
Yeah, the pilot, when we watched it, I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of a bummer, because I remember loving this show.
Yeah.
It was only on for 3 seasons, and then the main girl, Stacey Keenan, got cast in, the show was ending anyway. It was it was getting canceled. Like, the last episode was, the episode title of the last episode of season 3 was See You in September, ? So they knew that they were, like, on the chopping block. And they ended with kind of a, tie it all up in a bow. So, yeah, she was going to star and be one of the kids in Step by Step, which we've watched in the later seasons where she was in college and had blonde hair. But she, at the beginning of Step by Step, still kind of looks like she does in this show with her long, sort of fuzzy red hair.
Yes, and she's really good in this.
She is really good in this.
She's got some emotional stuff that I think she handles really well for an adolescent sitcom actor. But since this episode...
She reminds me of Melissa Joan Hart. Like a young girl in her teens kind of heading a sitcom, good for her.
But what she does in this episode is much heavier than anything Clarissa had to do in her show. But so this episode is going to really dig into the premise of this show. So I want to make sure I understand this, because this is basically 3 men and a baby, except it's 2 men and a teenager.
And the mom dies instead of the mom is like, I just need a break.
So that's what I wanted to ask, is this a scenario where she died? Despite the fact that I just said we watched the first episode for fun, I don't remember
a while ago.
What the premise is.
Yeah, so the mom, her name's Marcy, had a wild week in Key West about 12 years ago at the beginning of this episode, at the beginning of the pilot.
So kind of a Mamma Mia situation.
Yeah. So 1974 is supposed to be when this all went down. She had a wild week in Key West, and she was sort of competing, these 2 very different men were competing for her affections while they were all down there, some on vacation
Joey
and some
Michael.
Right. Joey and Michael. Paul Reiser plays Michael. He's the uptight banker, like finance guy. And Joey is the downtown cool artist.
I've never been so confident. Maybe it was just subconscious in my mind, but I felt like I had no memory of what this character's name was, but I started writing in my notes Joey, because I'm just like, there's no way this character's name is not Joey. He just looks so much like that.
Well, so I think this actor, his name's Greg, something with an E is his last name.
Looks like Kenny Loggins.
So that's interesting that you say that. I think he looks like a cross between Kenickie and George Michael.
Kenickie is the actor from Grease who then went on to be in Taxi.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess. But the thing is, neither of those guys, I guess George Michael has a beard, but he's got the like sexy, smoldering stubble beard. This guy, to me...
Most of the time does have that stubble beard.
Yeah, I feel like this guy is 1 or 2 attachments up on the shaver thing, where that's why I say Kenny Loggins, because he has like a well-trimmed beard, but still a beard.
No, it's true.
But anyway, yes, classic dichotomy of he's the goofy, fun one, Paul Reiser is the serious, uptight one.
Right.
Ergo, the story that we're going to have.
It's the odd couple with a kid.
Yeah, exactly. And so this episode is going to begin with the daughter. It's her 14th birthday. They're in her bedroom and they're both giving her, and again, there's nothing untoward or weird about this show, but now that I'm so old, all of these people look like teenagers to me. Like all three of them, young Paul Reiser, this Joey guy, and Stacy Keenan, whatever her name is, the three of them being in this bedroom together, they all look like they're like children to me, and so I kind of wanted to be like, guys, can you maybe take it out to the living room? I don't know. I just don't like her.
I also thought it was kind of a strange setup. And the reason they did it is because they had the other set, like the downstairs set, was all set up for these different dream sequences we're going to have. So that's why they weren't down in the normal set.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really strange, too. Like, why are you waiting till her bedtime on
they're
her
like
birthday
tucking her in
to give her all her presents?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's not like you can't go in your kid's bedroom. But yeah, I just kind of felt it had a weird vibe to me. But the setup here is that Joey has given her 14 birthday presents because she's turning 14.
Birthday, yeah.
Whereas Paul Reiser, Michael, has given her a 14-carat
gold watch from Tiffany's.
Right. Okay. And so, like, I get that in and of itself, I guess, is supposed to symbolize their personality difference.
Well, it's yes, but also the jacket, because you'll notice later on Dream Mom, so like Dream Marcy, has the same jacket in black, and she's also wearing the same watch.
Okay. So Stacy, or Nicole, the daughter, asks them straight up, like, what does she say? Like,
so now that I'm 14, there's something I've always wanted to know, and I'm a grown up now, so I feel like I can ask it, and you can tell me, why couldn't my mom choose between you?
Right. And so this is where, again, I'm thinking back to the premise, like, did she die? When did she die?
They didn't know they had a kid until the mom died. So this is one of these situations where 12 years later, they get called into a judge's office.
Yeah,
and this happens
we remember
in the
this.
pilot,
She shows up at their apartment and doesn't speak or anything. So her death, in a sense, it's almost incidental. Her death is the reason why they have custody over the girl, but not the reason why she didn't continue to stay with one of them.
Right. She basically, the way the kind of lore of the show sort of lets you understand it is that she had this wonderful week with the two of them. She loved them both dearly. They all sort of lived in New York, but she never could choose between them, and neither of them were ever involved in the child's life, nor knew they had a child.
She just pieced out and said, I choose neither of you. I'm going to live my life.
And now, oops, I'm pregnant. And also, we just never run into each other in New York City.
Right. So understandably, Nicole's understanding of this is all a little sketchy. And so, she's like, why couldn't she decide between the two of you? And then it's funny, like Paul Reiser sort of sets up the episode by going like, well, kiddo, life is a little weird. Sometimes you just have to ponder the different scenarios that could happen. You know, just ponder the different things.
Because if you were with, if your mother had chosen me, our life would have been perfect. Yeah. And then Joey's like, and if your mother had chosen me, our life would have been fun. Yeah. And then she drifts off to sleep with those thoughts in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we get a very self-conscious dream episode. Yes. One of these things, it's not like any dream anyone has ever had.
Oh, no, it's 100% like dreams you have where you're like, I'm awake. I'm asleep. This isn't real, but it doesn't matter. You still get chased anyway.
Yeah, exactly. No, I never realize I'm in a dream, even when I'm like trying to figure out if I'm in a dream. This girl, Nicole, has a dream where she gets the judge character, the sort of surly, basically the only other like main character on the show.
Yeah, who is by this point in the series bought the building that they live in and is the landlord of that building. Yeah, so that way she can continue to be in their lives. Because
Mr. Feeney becomes the college principal, right? And she, the judge that granted you custody, now buys out your building.
That's right. In early episodes in season 1, they were living, she was living part-time at Michael's apartment uptown and part-time at the loft. And Nicole gets sick of that and stages a sit-in at school. And then the judge says, you guys all need to live in one place.
Yeah.
So they decide the loft is the best. And so Michael gives up his apartment. They all move into the loft. And then a few episodes later, the judge buys the building.
Right. So the judge/landlady shows up in her dream and says, I'm a phantom. She said that's how she describes herself. She's basically like the Bob Marley.
She's like, I'm in my own bed dreaming.
Yeah, she's a ghost of Christmas past, present, and future all rolled into one. Yeah, she has a funny joke where she says, oh, I'm having my own dream in real life. She says, it's something about me, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and soap on a rope, right? So very spicy comment from the judge lady. And then, she takes her like Christmas Carol style to these different scenarios where first she goes to, basically she envisions a scenario where Michael and her mom, Marcy, stayed together and became her parents.
Yep.
And we get like a 10-minute scenario of that. And then vice versa. So we get, this dream scenario episode where Nicole gets to see these two different versions of her life.
Yeah.
And it plays out in, I think we would agree, exactly the way that you would expect, right?
Yeah, in a sitcom like this, of course. And so, the lifestyle with her mom and Michael, she's like the typical Upper East Side prep school girl.
She looks like she's on her way to Gryffindor House.
She looks like a Gossip Girl, like the uniforms they wear in Gossip Girl. It's like the 80s version of those.
Yeah, the little burgundy outfit
exactly.
with the cap.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so she is, so they're prepping her for college, even though she just got into high school. And, she's got 38 after school activities and she's, straight A's and everything except this one A-, and they're so ashamed. And she's
that's funny. So I want to make sure I'm understanding this. This woman, we see this very nice looking young woman, same age as Paul Reiser. And that's her mom, Marcy.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't sure if this is like a character, because again, I didn't know it was the mom dead, absolutely, whatever. So is this the first time we're seeing
first and only
this
time in the whole series? Yeah.
Okay. So this is her projection, basically, of like, if my mom, I guess her mom died, she knows what her mom looks like and everything.
Right,
this
exactly.
is her memory fantasizing of her mom.
Yeah.
Okay. Married to Paul Reiser.
Yeah. And so, and they're, like I said, they're living this very like Upper East Side finance bro, lifestyle. And, and everything is great until she starts to ask her parents, well, what about, why don't we go and get some burgers, or why don't we just go down to Soho and wander around a little bit? And they're like, Soho?
Yes.
Ew.
They're disgusted by the idea of walking around Soho, and they're disgusted by the idea of living in a loft, which is, of course, where they live. Now, we didn't mention one of the shocks to me watching the theme song of this is young Giovanni Ribisi is a cast member in this show.
Right. He plays one of two suitors that she has over the course of the series. The other one is Chad Allen. He was one of the brothers in Our House. You remember Our House with with diabetes.
Wilford Brimley. Yeah. Now, Giovanni Ribisi is one of my favorite actors, bar none.
I love that. He was good. Even good. He's even good in this. Yeah, he's so good.
He has one little part where he comes in the schoolboy outfit.
And he's giving her shit because he's like, I do not like the way I'm being portrayed in this dream.
Yeah,
I should be much more manly. I should sweep you away. We should go for a walk on the beach.
Yeah, they're constantly making reference, all the characters. Oh, why did you imagine me like this in your dream? Or, oh, thanks for giving me this cool suit in your dream or whatever. But little Giovanni Ribisi, as he's storming out of the room, she asked him a question or something. He goes, I don't know. It's your dream. And I could see at like 9 years old, that fire in his eyes.
He's like 13, 14.
Whatever he is. I could see that. Yeah, that off-kilter Ribisi energy.
Yeah, he's only, 6 years away from being Phoebe's brother.
Oh, yeah. That's, he's done lots of stuff. But so, we get, it's the obvious thing of, okay, in this version, her life is very pleasant, but boring. In each dream scenario, whatever guy isn't the spouse. We get the other dad, so in this case, Joey, is this sort of invisible heckler that kind of, makes little comments. Oh, this is boring. Wouldn't you rather live with me or whatever?
Yeah.
And then
where's the fun?
Yeah, and then we switch over to her dream scenario. What if Joey had stayed with Marcy? And in this version, she basically has the life of Carly Shay, right? Her brother is Spencer. Yeah. Her not her brother. Her dad is Spencer from iCarly.
He's an artist.
With the installation
has
pieces,
a loft.
weird statues and stuff, weird overalls covered in paint. Yeah, just totally Spencer vibe.
And they have a whole conversation about how, the Picasso exhibit is only going to be at the museum for one more day. We should go there. And she's like, oh, but I have school. And they're like, well, you don't have to go if you don't want to. And she's like, I don't. And they're like, yeah, we don't make you study if you don't want to. We don't make you do this if you don't want to. And she's like, well, maybe I should just go to school for a little while. And then she looks at her watch and she's like, I'll meet you. And they're like, oh, what is that thing? What is that corporate thing that tells you that you have to divide the day into pieces and ruins your life? And she's like, you mean a watch?
Yeah, I've never heard of this. Like, I've never heard of somebody objecting to watches as like the instrument of oppression.
I mean, that's what people used to when they wanted to remain Luddite, right? Like that.
Was it watches per se?
I mean, watches, anything like that. Now it's computers, phones, and all the like.
Yeah, but this I noticed the mom in this scenario reminded me a lot of Rayanne from My So-Called Life. They've got her just dressed up in this way that's like, I guess it's earlier than that, but I'm getting that just
like 10 years earlier. But she had her hair kind of like in the first one, she had it sort of swooped back and pulled into a ponytail in the back, but it was kind of still puffy around her head. And in this one, the way that you show that she's still cool is that they have it kind of swooped to the side, and it's still the puffy sort of ponytail around her head, but it's off to the side instead of straight back.
Yeah, but so we get, the same thing, but the opposite, right? We have this one, it's like this weird, it's oppressive how laid back they are, basically. They object to the notion of watches. They won't let her, go to school.
Well, no, though, they're saying you can do whatever you want. We're not telling, but she's like, whoa, hold on. I should have some structure, right? Shouldn't my family be providing me with that?
Yeah. And then, of course, in this one, Paul Reiser is there as the, spectral observer. But Joey can see him, and they get into an argument of, you don't even respect the logic of dreams. You're not supposed to be able to see the omniscient, invisible, brother-in-law or whatever. And so, that's when Nicole starts to realize, oh, this is the special sauce that makes my life work.
Well, and it was so, this was the part that I was like, this is so sitcom-y, because she's watching them argue and she's smiling and she goes, they're arguing. I feel so safe. Yeah. And then she turns around and her mom is gone. Yes. And she's like, wait, she left again and didn't say goodbye. And then she's all upset. And it was like, okay, I knew we had to get here at some point, but it just turned on a dime,
But that's when we get the really emotional scene. Because, then Nicole goes, I guess, to her bedroom. She goes and finds her mom.
Well, she talks to the judge first, and the judge is like, see, this is why the life that you have is the life that you have, because it wouldn't be all the things that you wanted if these two weren't together, or the three of you weren't together. And then so she goes back up to bed and her mom is in there.
Yeah. And so, she's talking to the mom. Like I said, she gets really emotional. The actress does it really well.
She does. And now her mom, by the way, is in clothes that, in quotes, clothes that she would remember her. And it's sort of a mix. She has the dress that she would have worn when she was with Michael, but then she has the same jacket that Joey gave her, only in black.
Yeah.
And so it's you can see how both sides of her personality would be interested in each of these guys just by her clothes.
Yeah. And Nicole basically suggests a throuple. She goes well, what if you stayed with both of them?
Yeah.
And
the mom goes, face.
Well, that's another kind of dream.
She was like, that's a dream just for me. I was like, oh my God.
So we get a little sense of, between the judge dreaming about Arnold Schwarzenegger and this lady responding to the throuple idea. Yeah. Lots of fun.
Well, and then earlier too, when Paul Reiser was like, Michael was like coming on to the mom and being like, oh, I just want to take you into our bedroom and smooch. And the judge is like, what? And Stacey Keenan's character is like, I'm 14. Smooching is as hot as my dreams get.
Yeah.
And the judge is like, good girl.
Yeah, which I don't know, I guess. Yeah, and so this, they have their last little moment. We get the mind-blowing special effects of the mom,
the mom
goes to leave the room.
as she walks through the door.
And yeah, they have her like dissolve away as she walks through the door.
But the wall, right?
Yeah. Again, it's like the same vibe as the Christmas Carol, where she wakes up and she's like, oh, I just have so much gratitude for my life as it really is. And she comes down and hugs them. And this is, pretty textbook, like alternate timeline by way of like, let's kind of assess what our life is and now we don't have it so bad, or, what's the use in sort of like lamenting what could have been, you know?
Right.
All right. Let's see how they do it in Malcolm in the Middle.
Season 2, episode 20, Bowling. Highest rated episode of Malcolm in the Middle ever.
Well, that's interesting, because I was going to say I have a lot of skepticism about Malcolm that has nothing to do with the quality of the show. It just came out at a time when I was not in the market for family shows, and because it is a sort of modern-ish single camera show, it doesn't have that nostalgia for me, so I've just never been drawn to it. But this episode was great. This was really, really good. Mise en scène up the wazoo. The way that they handled this timeline thing was really, really clever and really kind of expertly executed. And this one, total opposite. We're going to have My Two Dads is what if my whole life was completely different? And now this is going to be all focused on just this one scenario. What if one evening went two different ways?
Yes. So Dewey is the youngest son, and he's in trouble because he killed a neighbor's parakeet. So, and then the middle two boys, Malcolm and Reese, have a bowling party. So one parent has to stay home with Dewey because he's grounded, and one parent has to drive the boys to the bowling party. And then the oldest son is away at like a military academy that happened kind of somewhere around season 1, beginning of season 2. He got sent off to this military academy because he's always getting into trouble. And so he just has one phone call home. We don't see much of him. So our kind of sliding doors that we have in this episode is either the mom, Jane Kasmerick, takes the boys bowling, or the dad takes the boys bowling. And that's, what's his face? Bryan Cranston for Breaking Bad.
Yeah. And this, just the way that the show sort of shows us this little gimmick it's going to do is just, it's so effortless and well done. Like they do this split screen where, again, it's just the first scene. They don't spell it out. They just chop the screen in half and show on the left, Jane Kasmerick with the boys in the car. On the right, Bryan Cranston with the boys in the car. Bryan Cranston gets lost because he's dumb and doesn't know where he's going, whereas Jane Kasmerick finds the place right away.
But is like reading the boys the riot act the entire time. Like she's the disciplinarian in the family, and the dad's kind of the easygoing one, and that's their personalities.
But yeah, that split screen then goes away, and from then on in the episode, you get it. You
it's
get the
flopping
way it's
back
working.
and forth. Yeah.
And what they do that's really fun is they constantly have continuous shots. So they're often not cutting between one version versus the other.
Yeah.
They'll do continuous things where they'll be on a character or an object, and they'll do some sort of a camera move and have the scene keep going continuously and have the scene continue, but now you've been taken into that other timeline, and they just have all of these little cues that make you understand which timeline you're in, even as the shot keeps going continuously. It's really, really good.
There's one I noticed in particular where they kind of like they panned down to Malcolm's feet in the bowling shoes, and then it cut, you know, to the dad's feet in those same style bowling shoes, and it panned up, and it was the dad.
Yeah, or other times you've got the little boy in the bed in the version where his mom is home with him, and so you pan up from the boy in the bed to the mom saying goodnight, you know, bedroom door, then you pan back down, and it's Bryan Cranston in bed, and now we know, oh, now we're in the other scenario where he's looking after the kid, and he's been tricked into falling asleep and all that.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, very, very well done. And in terms of what's actually going on, it's just like you said. The mom, Jane Kaczmarek, is, like, for my money, like, behaving pretty unconscionably. Like, she
that's why they always give her a hard time.
Yeah, she just humiliates the kids. Like, not just reads them the riot act, but goes into the bowling alley with them. We've already had Malcolm explaining to the camera, as is the device of the show, that this is a co-ed bowling party. There's hormones going all over the place. Jane Kaczmarek says at one point, you could cut the hormones in this place with a knife, right?
Like, I can't believe no other parents decided to stay.
Yeah, there's going to be girls there. This is aspect of this story that I did not like, is the notion of brothers as romantic rivals. This is something I never had to deal with in school. My brother and I
were far enough apart in age.
Yeah, exactly. That we never, that was never a thing. And so as we start...
Well, and it does kind of oog me out, because they are supposed to be like, you know, one grade apart or whatever, or Reese maybe like failed a grade, so he's like, they're in the same grade or something. But this girl that they're both kind of chasing after, her name's Beth, like, she is noticeably older than Malcolm, and it oogs me out.
That was my first impression, and then I kind of took a step back and said, well, I guess it's just supposed to be that Malcolm is little. You know, Frankie Muniz is a little guy. He's not matured
as much as she has, or whatever.
Yeah, and also, you know, as we've said before, it's that age where, you know, you're Fred Savage and little Winnie Cooper, you know, towers over him. And so it's just like that. But initially I felt the same thing. Like, well, at this age, you don't have these two boys going after the same girl. But in any case, that is what's happening. And so the two basic scenarios we have are, on the one, Jane Kaczmarek, the mom, coming into the bowling alley where all the kids are like hanging out, having fun, and taking over, saying, you need a chaperone, that's going to be me, and sitting down and just like completely commandeering the whole thing.
The bowling party, and saying, you kids are on this lane, we got two lanes, why are you all over the place? You're on that lane, you're on this lane, let's go. You're up next, Malcolm, come on.
The boys and girls that are too close, says, let me see some daylight between the two of you, you know, just all that stuff, versus the other scenario is Bryan Cranston still staying at the bowling alley, but he goes off to the side. He says, I know, you know, he's the quote unquote cooler parent.
Right.
And frankly, I think he just objectively in this episode is the much cooler parent, and says, you know, all right, you guys go have fun. I'm going to go bowling over here on the other side.
Well, he says, I'll pick you up later. So they don't even know he's still there.
So he's secretly bowling.
Yeah, he just is like, you know, I'm going to go down to the end so I don't have to drive home and come back. I can just hang out here for a little while.
He has a fun subplot where he's trying to bowl the perfect game, and he keeps mounting all of these superstitions where every time he hits a strike, he realizes, oh, I scratched my foot in a weird way, so now I got to do that every time. And, oh, my fly is unzipped, now I've got to unzip my fly every time, and so on and so forth.
Take a sip of my Sprite.
Yeah, but so that's it. Like, that's the premise of this episode. I feel like we can kind of comment on whatever we want. Like, a lot of stuff happens. It's all kind of crazy and fun and farcical. But it's like these two different parenting styles in this sort of butterfly effect way lead to, in one scenario, Malcolm has the upper hand with this girl, and in the other scenario, the brother Reese does. And it's just really...
Until the end, though.
Well, yeah, and then they flip. And yeah, like, I don't know how much you want to get into it, because I feel like we'll drive ourselves crazy trying to like navigate all the ins and outs
I lined
of the
it up.
plot.
I've got a map.
Okay, go ahead.
We can do it. Okay, so When mom stays at the bowling alley, Reese gets his shot with the girl. And when dad stays at the bowling alley, Reese also gets first shot with the girl. When dad's at the bowling alley, Reese tells his stupid joke right off the bat.
Yes. Joke is being very polite.
Yeah, he spits soda in the girl's face and is like, oh, look, we went for a walk on the beach and now you got all this salt water in your hair.
His joke is, do you like walks on the beach,
where the
breeze
sea,
in your hair, all these things.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then he spits and blows in her face and something.
And she's like, this is disgusting. So when the dad is there, Reese loses his shot with the girl right from the get-go. Yes. And then when the mom is there, she keeps interrupting him trying to tell this joke and pulling him away to go take his turn. So the girl actually likes Reese for a longer period of time when the mom is there. It's like the mom is a presence that sort of keeps...
She's saving him from himself.
Yeah, exactly. Which is one of the reasons she's such a beast in this show, because her boys are animals.
Yes.
Like, they literally had to send the oldest one away to military school, boarding school, because he was such a bad kid. Like, she's got 4 wild animal children. There's a reason she's a psycho mom.
Yeah, the other episode of Malcolm in the Middle we've covered is the one where they submitted her as a beauty pageant contestant as a joke because
they're so mean.
Yeah. So, all right, continue.
Okay, so that's Reese and the girl, right? So mom actually is helping him in this weird way.
Yeah,
but,
accidentally.
Yeah, accidentally. And then with his mom there, Malcolm has no game. Like, he is completely under her thumb. He can't bowl for shit. Whereas when his dad is there, he's his own man. He's feeling very confident. He doesn't have anybody looking over his shoulder. He's bowling strikes. He's doing great. And so he basically, he ends up getting his shot with the girl as soon as she comes back from the bathroom, cleaning up all the, soda off her face and that was in her hair. And so we've got those two kind of parallel things happening. You've got like you said, the dad with the perfect game. And then you've got the Dewey, right? Dewey is the son that's left at home, right? And so Dewey, he ends up tricking, when the dad stays home and the mom goes bowling, Dewey ends up tricking his dad, gets him to read him a story, and then his dad falls asleep and he gets up and he has soda and pizza, and he ends up giving away credit cards to the pizza guy because he doesn't know how credit cards work.
Yeah.
And then at the end sort of sneaks his dad back out there and makes it look like his dad ordered the pizza and drank all the soda. And then when his mom stays home, his mom is on to all his tricks, nothing's getting by her. And then at the last second, she's like, all right, well, you can come watch TV. And she's like, no, wait, is this another trick? And she's like, but you've been good and you haven't been pulling as many tricks as you normally do. So you should come watch TV. No, wait, this is definitely another trick.
She can't tell if it's a mind game.
And so she goes, okay, you could come watch TV, but we're watching something you hate. We're watching C-SPAN. Yeah, C-SPAN. And as they're walking out the door, she was like, which one of us won? And he goes, unclear. And then they just enjoy TV together in the evening.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the two sort of parallel things that are happening. And the big part of the story then becomes, well, so what happens with Malcolm and the girl or Reese and the girl, right? So we know that Malcolm got his shot with the girl in the dad bowling version, right?
Right.
And
his running thing is sort of like he and the girl in the version where he's doing well are always have this flirty thing going on, but it seems like
the girl is very aggressive. She's like, well, let's find a place where we can be alone.
Yeah, and everything there's this constant escalation of what else are you good at? Oh, a few things. Well, why don't you show me? All of that kind of stuff. And we get the sense that Malcolm is he has a hard time pulling the trigger.
Yeah, he's out of his own depth for sure, as you would say, in macking on girls.
Yeah.
And then Reese, when the mom is there, Reese is doing really, really well, all the way up until the point when Malcolm, who has been totally henpecked by his mom and can't bowl, and she's brought in bumpers on the lanes. This is what I related to the most. And giving him a baby ball and everything else.
Try the girls' ball. You've hit three pins since you switched to the girls' ball.
Yes. And now no other kids are bowling. They have a lane that's just for Malcolm, and his mom is just screaming at him, and he just loses it. And it picks up the ball, marches down to the end. He's like, you want to see me get a strike? and he throws the ball from like a foot away at the pins, and it still misses all the pins and goes into the back. And all the kids are laughing, and Reese is laughing most of all, and like really kind of making fun of his brother in a loud way. And that's what turns the girl off. So like finally, when the mom isn't paying attention to Reese, he shows his true colors, and the girl doesn't want to be with him anyway. So then at the last second of the mom being there, Malcolm gets his shot with the girl.
Right, because she says straight up, she sits down with them and says, would you like to kiss me? A little bit of like Das Ex makeout.
Yeah.
Deus Ex makeout. And then in the
he like lays her down on the table, and I was like, what is happening?
They're going at it. And then in the reverse story, it's the same thing, where Malcolm has had this, again, he's not totally stepping up to the challenge, but he's had this effortless charm with this girl that the brother flunked out with immediately. She takes him. The girl is like, I know where we can be alone. This was also exhilarating to me. They go behind the scenes of the bowling pins, which was something I've always wondered what it would look like back there. And it's everything I thought it would be.
We just watched a Bob's Burgers episode with like the same thing, with all the kids going back behind the bowling pins.
That's a cartoon. This is like, you see these big, levers and conveyor belts and wheels. And
they're like
things,
yelling because
gears.
they can't hear each other because it's just like the pins hitting.
Yeah, so it's like they're inside Big Ben or something, like all this mechanical stuff. And then it's like, when Malcolm is like, all right, I'm finally going to make my move, he gets stuck on like some turbine or something.
Yeah,
and
he gets hooked up in the ball return or the pin return.
So I'm thinking about all those cautionary tales of like 17 children were killed in escalators last year or something. I'm going like, this is going to be a grisly demise for Malcolm in the Middle.
This is how he ends up ruining his dad's perfect game.
Yeah, he gets somehow like caught in the thing, very silly, but he gets like transported basically up into the pins where his dad, at this point now, all the adults in the bowling alley have like gathered around his dad. They're cheering him on. He's insisting nobody can move. No one can disrupt all of his superstitions. And then, funny farcical ending where everything comes together. Malcolm gets like served by the bowling machine into the
and knocks over
pins.
all the pins and makes it a strike, but it doesn't count because he did it. Any reasonable bowling alley would just reset those pins and let you go for the last one.
Right. I mean, in their defense, I feel like it still would be a weird asterisk on the whole thing. But also, this accomplishes the same thing, this sort of Deus Ex Machina in reverse, where the girl sours on him.
So, like, I think in both versions of the story, Reese's kind of innate nastiness ruins it for him. He ruins it for himself, and Malcolm gets the girl, even if it's only, momentarily.
Interesting. Yeah, this one, and it ends, of course, with, it goes back to the split screen shot. So we get, mom walking in with the boys, dad walking in with the boys, and both of them saying to the spouse who stayed home, next time you take them.
That's right.
Funny little tag. And yeah, this one, I mean, look, I think it works first and foremost as a farce. And like I said, just the way they make it so fluid like that, it kind of feels like the movie Birdman or something, how it's just kind of gliding from one scene to the next. And yeah, it's primarily these funny little details and the way things affect each other. But it also starts hinting at these themes that several of these episodes do of like, there is a sort of core character to us that does kind of stick even throughout the little coincidences and little changes, just like you said, like Malcolm has a certain charm, his brother has a certain shittiness, and that's going to kind of shine through despite the ups and downs that the different scenarios present.
The different levels of parental involvement.
Yeah, and also that like a lot of times life is counterintuitive, that your mom insisting on staying and, helping with the gutter balls and stuff, doing all these things that seem bad might lead to something good happening and vice versa.
Right. Right. Well, so this episode won Emmys for directing and writing.
Nice.
And it also served as the inspiration or part of the inspiration for one of our other episodes. Dan Harmon was inspired by this and listed as one of his references for Remedial Chaos Theory, which is the Community episode we watched later.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, we'll get to that as soon as we've tackled Scrubs.
Season 3, Episode 16, My Butterfly.
Yeah, I think we've only talked about Scrubs once on our Old Friends, New Trouble episode.
Oh, right.
Who was the old friend
Ryan
that came
Reynolds.
to town? Ryan Reynolds. I knew it was someone of note.
Yeah.
This is another one who was kind of in that uncanny valley in the early 2000s where I didn't watch it initially, but it would come on, like in reruns and stuff when I would be, stretching before my run and stuff. And I always found I especially liked John C. McGinley, of course,
Yes,
right?
yes.
He really
Hilarious.
sells that character that could be, pretty odious. He really manages to kind of humanize it and keep it funny. And my thought,
I'm so annoyed with my job and I'm such a curmudgeon and I'm always cranky at everybody, but also I have a heart of gold.
Yeah, and I also am genuinely really, really smart, and he sells all of that. And yeah, I feel like the tone of this show was always a little tough for me. In a sense, it's the same thing I was saying about The Good Place, where it's like, when it comes to sitcoms, I just kind of like things simple. It's fine for it to be like broad comedically, but when you start getting into this thing of like, oh, half the show is going to be the fantasies in the character's mind, and it's going to be, it's almost going to be like this live action cartoon.
Right, because the funny little cutaways of what he's imagining.
So many funny little cutaways.
Yeah.
To me, this is very much, this was born out of The Simpsons and Family Guy, and it just brings it into the world of live action. And none of that is really a criticism, but it's all, for me, I just prefer, give me a show about an office, give me a show about a hospital, fine. I don't need the like goofy fantasy sequences and stuff, but I always enjoyed it when I would see it in pieces. I never thought that this was a bad show.
Yeah, this was one of those that was like on my TiVo from the kind of the beginning. I think it starts in 2001. This is season 3, so this is like 2003 or 4 time frame. And yeah, it was just one of those shows. I think I've probably seen every episode of at least the first 6 or 7 seasons. The show proper went 8 seasons, and then they had a 9th season that was called Scrubs the Interns, and it had a whole only JD and Turk and John C. McGinley remained. Dave Franco was in the new cast. He was one of the interns.
Yeah.
There were a couple other recognizable people in that, but I never watched a single episode of that. And I don't even know if I've seen the 8th season, like the finale, of this Scrubs proper, because by that time life had gotten busy.
Yeah, for me, it's the two guys were a little bit of a liability for me. I didn't hate them, but like I said, John C. McGinley, A+, Elliot
and Turk, not so much.
Yeah, Sarah Chalk, is that how you say it? Chalk. I really liked her whole vibe. Watching this now, it's like her haircut is definitely a little sort of like of that time, but it really works. Like,
that was
I like
her
look.
I'm getting confident in season 3 haircut.
Yeah.
Because Elliot goes through all these phases where she's like, yeah, I know I'm the hot, smart doctor. And then she but it turns out she's this like nervous, anxious, person, and then and very quirky, and then by season 3 she's like, no, I'm taking my confidence back, I'm getting a cool haircut, but she's still herself. She's still like nervous.
What they should have done is in that last season when she left, they should have got the girl who originally played Becky on Roseanne
to come back and play her. That would just be like its own little sliding door situation, right?
Yeah. So this one is going to be, the title of the episode is My Butterfly.
Yes.
All of the Scrubs titles are My something.
Yeah. So and that is because this is supposed to be like JD's character writing in his diary, like at the end of a day or whatever.
It's a very subjective show. Like we said, that's why you get all these little fantasy cutaways and stuff. Because it's all his perception of things. Yeah. So Butterfly, right? This was after Jurassic Park, after Jeff Goldblum sexily explained to all of us who weren't already familiar
of what butterfly
the concept of
is.
a butterfly flaps its wings in China and such happens. Like you said, that movie with Ashton Kutcher, The Butterfly Effect, came out around this time, turn of the century.
I think so too.
And so, yeah, this was something we were all familiar with. So this one is going to make it literal. They have a butterfly fly in to the hospital.
Yes.
And first time around, it lands on this woman's cleavage who's like sitting in the waiting room.
Yeah, so they set up a bunch of stuff, though, before this happens, right? The things they set up are that the surgeons, Turk is a surgeon, the surgeons are all superstitious, and they all have their little routines.
Yeah.
And Turk's superstition for right now is that in order to be successful when he does surgery, he needs to have his
Tabasco
do-rag. That's right. And he can't find it. He must have left it at home, or it's in the laundry or something. So that is what his character needs, this time. So the other thing they set up before we go into the butterfly effect is that there's a little girl who's getting a bone marrow transplant. She has cancer, and she's lost her little pink stuffed dog. Yes. And so Elliot has promised that she would find the pink stuffed dog. So those are the two things. We have two characters that have goals in this episode, to find the do-rag, to find the dog. And that's what we know before the butterfly effect takes place.
Yeah. And then, the butterfly effect is literally the butterfly landing on a woman's cleavage.
Landing on a man's cleavage.
We get, first time it's a woman, get a very 2004 notion when Turk is referring to the woman's breasts as her lovelies.
Her lovelies, yes.
He keeps saying, oh, honey, you can't expect me to not look at her lovelies if her lovelies are right there.
They're lovely.
So...
And then in the other one, right, when the butterfly lands on the man's cleavage, then Carla, Turk's girlfriend, is making fun of him for looking at that and not being able to look away when right next to is like, this rack and, this gorgeous lady's rack, and she's wearing her niece's tank top. Yeah. And he's like, but I can't look away. Oh, those are nice lovelies, but I can't.
But so this is an interesting comparison. So the idea in this, right, because technically the butterfly effect metaphor is just the flapping of a butterfly's wings, right?
Course.
But in this one, it's the butterfly landing on a woman's boobs versus a fat guy's boobs. And so it's interesting how it's like in Malcolm in the Middle, it was if mom takes us to the bowling alley or if dad does, this very sort of like intentional thing with these very clear personality differences.
Right. And also kind of like from a kid's perspective.
Yeah. But this one is this like pure chance thing, just like the metaphor is supposed to imply, this little thing that seemingly has nothing to do with anything. But then the story plays out in kind of a similar way, except this one is going to be linear. We're not going to get the
in
cool
and out.
jumping back and forth. Yeah, we're going to get version A and then version B, kind of like My Two Dads.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So version A is basically like we're just watching like a normal episode of Scrubs. We have the sort of patient of the week is this guy that's presenting with angina, and
he's presenting with like he ate gas station sushi, so they're saying it might be this, it might be that. They don't know what's wrong with him.
I thought they threw around angina, but regardless, they're not aware of what his real calamity is. That's the point.
Because angina has something to do with the heart, and they don't really know that they have anything to do with the heart until later on.
Yeah, so they don't know what the deal is with him. But in this first version, Dr. Cox yields to JD, right? JD kind of takes the lead, and Dr. Cox gives this whole speech about like, well, you know what, you're gonna have to take charge sometime. So
So and it all gets set up from like they do a really cool job at kind of like making certain things happen naturally through the story in a similar fashion. So like when the butterfly lands on the lady's boobs, Turk gets in trouble with his girlfriend for staring at lady's boobs. It sets up a little bit of a dynamic between the two of them that they're kind of arguing. Whereas in the other version, it sets up this dynamic that they're on the same page and kind of laughing with each other. And then Elliot comes over, and what has happened right after the butterfly lands on the girl's boobs, something happens, and one of the nurses spills a pile of smoothies. And so the janitor is having to clean all of that up, and Elliot comes over to ask for help in finding the dog, and the janitor can't because he has to clean up all these spills. So he's pissed off at the nurse. The nurse is pissed off at him for being kind of a jerk about not wanting to clean up the thing. Elliot is on her own to try to find this dog.
And JD is late to meet with Dr.
Well, JD isn't late. He runs to go and get there on time. So then he gets there on time, and Dr. Cox doesn't. We don't know where Dr. Cox is.
He's late. Yeah.
Right. So that's what sets up Dr. Cox saying to JD, well, since you were, on time and so fancy, why don't you take over?
Yeah, JD covers for Dr. Cox with Dr. Kelso. We get one of his funny little fantasy sequences where
he plays banjo.
Playing the banjo for some reason. Yeah. And then 10 seconds later, there's another fantasy sequence where he's playing with his little homemade dolls of himself, and Dr. Cox role playing is this everything you thought it would be?
Yeah, the day that Dr. Cox turns over the reins to him and lets him be in charge. And then his head pops off on the doll, and he's like, wait a minute. And then he comes back to reality. And so then they go in to meet the patient, and he's like, all right, you're in charge. What do you think? So they come back out into the hallway, and this is the best part of this part makes me laugh so hard. So JD does a spot on impersonation of the character that he's playing, and basically is like, what would Dr. Cox do? And then goes on this tirade, calls him, calls Dr. Cox Elena or something, Eleanor or whatever.
Dr. Cox is always going to address you by a woman's name.
Yes.
And he's also just going to rattle off a bunch of stuff that's really, really dense with medical jargon. And it's so good. It makes me appreciate the real Dr. Cox's performance all the more, because it is so pointed and accurate that you realize John C. McGinley is saying a ton of stuff all the time. And he makes it so effortless.
He's created this, it's almost like a Moira Rose kind of characterization. You know what I mean? It is so just, it's in itself, and it is nothing else. You know what I mean? There's nothing else like that. So when JD does the impression, it's hilarious. And you see, Dr. Cox kind of like, all right, I see what you're doing. And he goes, and then he's like, oh, sorry. And he does his impression of JD. And he's like, oh, sorry. I was in my own little world imagining some fantasy thing. And JD's like, I don't do that. Okay, back to reality.
Yeah. No, it's very funny. And then basically that little scenario ends with everything kind of going to hell. We get Carla goes home but doesn't notice that the do-rag is on the dog, and so she never finds the do-rag.
Stuffed dog, but
Yeah, right. Not the same stuffed dog Elliot is looking for. It's like a taxidermy dog.
It's a taxidermy. They call him Rowdy, and he is weird, and he exists in their apartment throughout the entire series. Yeah. But so do-rag. Turk asks her to go home because it's the end of her shift, and Dr. Kelso, the chief medical guy, is like, he's reading Carla the riot act for not signing out in time or clocking out in time. Turk steps in and is like, hey, and kind of fights her battle for her. She gets mad at Turk again, and so she goes home in a huff and is not really interested in digging through the laundry to try to find this thing for him. But then Elliot calls and is like, hey, I still couldn't find the dog. Will you come help? So she goes rushing back to the hospital to help find the dog and doesn't see the do-rag in the bathroom. And so then he doesn't have his lucky do-rag. Then their patient, Dr. Cox and JD's patient, starts coding, and they're like, oh shit, what's going on? We got to get him into surgery right now. So they go and they get him into surgery, and Turk doesn't have his lucky do-rag, and the guy dies on the table. And then they're sitting there at the, like a lunch table or whatever in the cafeteria, JD and Dr. Cox just kind of debriefing. And Dr. Cox is like, it's an aortic dissection. 90% of these people die. There is literally nothing you could do. He would have had to have tripped and fallen into his CT scan in order for us to even know that this was happening. There aren't any, the symptoms aren't clear. And this is where my little spidey sense starts going off. And I was like, wait a minute. So aortic dissection is how my grandpa died, but it's also how John Ritter died. And John Ritter played JD's dad on Scrubs.
Oh.
And so I was like, I wonder how close these episodes are to his death. And it's 6 months later. So they would have written it and shot it shortly after he died.
Yeah, that's crazy. But so it's one of those things of like we would have had no reason to test for this thing. Don't blame yourself. It happens. And then JD's interior monologue starts saying the same kind of stuff that Paul Reiser was talking about. He starts going like, I just can't help thinking about if things had gone a little bit differently. And then we get our transition to, the second half of the story is the butterfly landing on the fat guy instead of the lady's boobs. And we get, the whole, it's like Malcolm in the Middle, just all these differences. In this one, JD does not have the opportunity to cover for Dr. Cox, and Dr. Cox doesn't look kindly on him when JD voices his opinion.
Smoothies don't spill.
Yeah.
Right? So then the janitor says, absolutely, I can help you, Elliot, find the dog. And then he turns to JD and says, you know what? Why don't you and I get a fresh start? And they shake hands. And he's like, no, this is going to be at least a 3-minute
he insists
handshake.
on shaking his hand for like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
and, so
and that's how
JD
JD ends up late instead of Dr. Cox being late. And so when Dr. Cox is saying to him, medicine is a collaborative effort in the first version, in this version, he's like, I don't care about your opinions.
Yeah.
What you need to know about medicine is that it's not a collaboration. I am the boss and I tell you what's happening. And so then JD leaves and he goes and gets in an elevator with 3 other doctors, and he hears one of the doctors talking about a patient that he has that has similar symptoms to what JD and Dr. Cox's patient has, and it turns out it was some sort of like bowel obstruction. And so he goes back to Dr. Cox and he's like, look, I know you don't want to pay attention to what I have to say, but I think we should get him a CT scan. I think it might be this, bowel thing. And so Dr. Cox is like, you know what? Whatever. So he does trip. In this version, this patient does basically trip and fall into a CT machine.
So it's an interesting irony, kind of like the Malcolm in the Middle thing, or is it more of a case of like the sort of core characteristics will out in the end? Because what we have is the first time around, Dr. Cox being open to JD's suggestion, but they don't figure anything out.
Yeah, JD doesn't end up in a situation in which he can hear some sound medical advice from experienced doctors.
But it also, similar but in this, it's not even sound medical advice per se. It's just sort of like the way the chips fall, like the sort of happenstance. Because in this version, we get similar to how, it's like Malcolm's mom is messing up his chances with the girl, or is she? We have like JD is being completely shut out, but then when he does actually sort of chance his way into some insight, Dr. Cox is actually willing to listen to him. And then the interesting sort of wrinkle is it's not the thing that JD suspected, but him ordering the test nonetheless resulted in them finding this aortic whatever that saved the guy.
The beginning of it, yeah.
So it's a weird case of like, it's almost saying, like, on the one hand, like life is full of weird ironies where it seems like things don't go the right way and then they do. Or is it also sort of saying like, in the end of the day, Dr. Cox is the kind of person who is going to listen, who's going to respect cooperation and collaboration, regardless of how the sort of individual scenario plays out.
Even if he says he isn't,
even if the thing happens that puts him in a bad mood for whatever, it's like, no, at the end of the day, everybody's core fundamental tenets kind of shine through.
Yeah. Well, so also in this version, right, we've got Carla still gets scolded for not clocking out on time, but this time JD doesn't step up. Turk doesn't step up and fight her battle for her, and she turns around and she is like, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you support me? And so she gets mad at him for not supporting
like she's
her.
She's going to get mad either way,
one way or the other.
You could take it as like, women be tripping or whatever, but I think it's more just like a relationship thing.
Yeah,
sometimes
exactly. That's what it very much felt like, a relationship kind of thing. She goes home. She doesn't get a call from Elliot to help her find the stuffed dog. because Elliot's getting help from the janitor.
Yes, he takes her to the secret lost and found.
Right. And they find the dog, which is in the box marked free stuff, which is the lost and found. So Carla ends up eating a leftover couch Snickers, half of a leftover couch Snickers. So she takes a bite of it and it's like rotten and nasty. So she goes and spits it out in the sink, which is how she sees the do-rag on Rowdy. So she gets the do-rag, she goes back to the hospital, and now Turk has his lucky do-rag just in time for this guy to get wheeled into surgery early, much earlier than he did in the first one.
Right, because they know what they're doing.
Because they caught it. They did the CT scan. So the little girl, Elliot, doesn't have to let down her patient because the dog has been found, and we're in a much better situation to hopefully help this guy live in this situation. And he still codes on the table and dies. And so then the end of the episode, you've got JD and Dr. Cox again sitting in the cafeteria having a conversation, and it's very similar to the one we had in the first half where Dr. Cox is like, look, 90% of these, it doesn't matter when you catch them, that that's what's going to happen. They're gonna rip open, and they're really, you can't, like, it's really hard to fix a shredded aorta even when you already have a patient open and you're trying to fix it. And he's like, it was just his time and there was nothing we could do.
Yeah. And you got to think, I mean, this is something that, of course, like doctors would have to just contend with all the time, just all of the, doubts and sort of like just thinking
the
back on the scenarios. Yeah. And so this one, again, I don't think it's done in as like electrifying a way as the Malcolm in the Middle was, but it's kind of going over a lot of the same sort of philosophical ideas, or, also the same just comedic ideas of showing us the same thing, but, the different sort of like, little different branches of what happens. And yeah, just kind of saying like, you never can tell, right?
Yeah.
Like
no,
it's
true.
Everything's going to affect each other, but in ways that like we can't foresee.
Yeah. And so even though there might be a little bit of twist of fate that leads to something, sometimes even that little twist of fate doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's what, we have to deal with day to day as doctors, is kind of like the footnote on the episode. But what I like about this one, you were talking about the Malcolm in the Middle being electrifying in its storytelling. What I love about this one is the nuance. It's all the little tiny details that they are paying attention to with the smoothies and the janitor and the conversations that are parallel. I really like that. And that, to me, that's a Bill Lawrence thing. He's the showrunner for Scrubs. He also did Ted Lasso and some other things I'm sure you've heard of, like Cougar Town and whatever. But he pays attention to those kinds of things, and I love that. Like, that kind of attention to detail is so fun to me, which is why I love Community.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into the most complicated of all of these, Community.
Season 3, Episode 4, Remedial Chaos Theory.
Yep. Community, we know it, we love it. We've covered it a bunch of times before. It's always going to be doing some kind of interesting, clever play on the TV tropes or entertainment tropes in general. And so in this case, this is years before the Marvel multiverse or anything, but they're going to get into this notion of by casting a die, you set up a multiverse right there in your own living room of possibilities. But this is all going to go down in Troy and Abed's new apartment, right? That's how this starts.
That's right. So we're in season 3 now. So we've had, a couple of seasons of the Britta, Jeff, will they, won't they? And now we've kind of moved on from that. So sort of around season 2-ish, end of season 2-ish, is where we sort of first start to get that little percolating of, maybe there's something there between Annie and Jeff.
Which I don't like.
Well, and it's dealt with in the same way, because nobody really likes it. They're too far apart in age. It's kind of weird, but there is this sort of thing between them. And so that's kind of interesting. And I like the way they sort of deal with it in one of the timelines here. This episode also was nominated for an Emmy, and it sets up the idea of the darkest timeline, which becomes a major plot point throughout the rest of the series.
Yes. Yeah. This is basically like a science fiction concept like we will see in the Marvel movies and what is the one with the 5 different Batmans or whatever. Like, yeah, this is all going to start at their little housewarming party. Troy and Abed are, of course, one of the most fun parts of Community, their weird friendship.
Troy and Abed's new apartment.
Yeah, we get young Donald Glover in his fancy little, they're wearing these matching little like dinner jacket things. There's a point when Joel McHale says some dig on him, and Donald Glover goes, "Chops busted, fellow adult. Chops busted."
Yes, they're all dressed up in suits. Troy and Abed are both dressed up in suits. They have put out toilet olives. They read a book from the 1930s about how to have a very fancy dinner party.
Yeah.
So they've got, they're having a great time, and then they make this joke at the very beginning. You see the number on the door. Their apartment number is 303, and Britta and Annie are standing there looking at it going, is it 303 or 304? That's a reference to the episode number, right? Because these episodes were aired out of order. So this is episode 4, season 3, episode 4, but it was originally meant to be episode 33. So that's why they have that little joke, the little voiceover that is happening there. And then they go in, we see fancy Troy and Abed, and they explain that Shirley has been there for about 4 hours baking, and they're very happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be a thing throughout this, is that Shirley is baking and nobody likes that. But the characters are going to gather, and they're going to play Yahtzee. And this is one, we're going to get 6 different scenarios. So this
7.
All right, 7. So this is quite impressive, the economy of this, right? They establish a series of events that we're going to see over and over again. I guess the part that we only see once is Pierce, Chevy Chase's character, saying, they're always just going to repackage everything and try to sell it to you again. You can call this Yahtzee, but we all know it's Puerto Rican chess, right? But
yes.
They're going to sit down to play Yahtzee.
He also brings a bottle of Serbian rum that he's saying is like not even legal in Serbia.
Okay.
Don't you want to drink that, Jeff? And so that ends up on a table. And
Jeff's thing in this is he says, I can only stay a few minutes.
Right.
He's got this like fancy little black invitation that's like, oh, I've got this cool club opening. Look at this thing. It's like it was custom made to appeal to me. And Abed's like, yeah, I made that to trick you so you would,
keep
have this night free.
Yeah. He's like, I made that 3 months ago and sent it to you so you would keep this night free on your calendar.
Yeah. So they sit down to play Yahtzee. Abed says, Jeff, when you roll that die,
the doorbell rings. And
right.
The doorbell rings because their pizza is here.
Okay.
We also, prior to this, we get Shirley saying, I made pizza, but you didn't have all the ingredients. So I put ketchup and some cream cheese. Yeah. And they're like, but real pizza's coming. Abed's like, real pizza.
We used to make pizza like that with saltines, I think, like ketchup on saltines and a little
sounds
chain.
So gross.
Yeah, it was good.
So the doorbell rings.
Right.
Or the buzzer
so it's
rings.
not actually Yahtzee. I forgot. Like they're about to
going
play
to play
Yahtzee, but they're rolling the
yeah.
die to see who answers the door.
To see who gets pizza. And Jeff sets up the scenario. He picks up the die and he's like, okay, there's 6. There's 6 numbers on this die. There's 6 of you. So starting on my left, going around the circle 1 through 6. That's whoever rolls the die. Whatever number comes up on the die, you get the pizza. So he rolls, and then Abed stops him and says, you are now creating 6 different timelines. And Jeff rolls his eyes, is like, whatever, Abed, and rolls the dice. And we get this very like Doctor Who sort of Inspector
CGI
space-time thing that shows as the die is being rolled, it goes up and it drops down into a different portal, indicating the different timeline. So we start with 2. A 2 is rolled, and 2 is Annie, so Annie goes to get the pizza. Now, a thing that happens in every single one of the timelines is that when Jeff stands up at any point, the first time he stands up from the table, he gets whacked in the head by the ceiling fan
I
that's above the
related
table.
to this very hard. I smack my head in your old house, your parents' house. It's not the blades of the fan; it's the strings that hang down.
Yes.
But constantly, it's so frustrating.
Florida houses are flat and low to the ground. We don't have big high ceilings
so
because of hurricanes.
Time after time. Yeah, we get sort of like this Pavlovian training of like these little beats where we get Jeff standing up and hitting his head on the ceiling fan, and we also get Roxanne.
Yeah,
coming
Britta
on
turns on
iPod.
the iPod, and Roxanne starts playing, and she sings. She goes, Roxanne!
Yeah, and Jeff shuts her down immediately.
Yes, in almost every timeline.
Yes,
Jeff says no.
Right.
And then she gets up and says, where's the bathroom?
Now, I thought, the way this all turns out is great, but I initially thought, this iPod is on shuffle. And so this is going to be another random thing where with every roll of the dice, it's going to be a different song. I thought that would be a fun way to go with it, but that's not what they do. They play Roxanne, which I guess also shows, because it's Roxanne that in one of the later ones, they're all singing to at the end, right?
Right, because
so it shows
the
us,
song, that's the one timeline where Jeff doesn't stop her.
Right, but it shows us...
So the song gets to continue to play in that timeline.
But I'm just saying that this whole thing that we're seeing is all happening over the course of like 3 minutes because it's all taking place during Roxanne.
During the run of the song, Roxanne. Exactly. Yeah. So Annie goes to get the pizza. Britta sings Roxanne. Then she gets shut down. She gets up and goes to the bathroom. We don't find out what she's doing in the bathroom until a later roll. But in that later roll, we find out what she's doing is she's gone into the bathroom to smoke pot.
Yeah.
And then Abed goes to the bathroom and is like, I smell something funny. And she's like, don't do that. That's so, that's so embarrassing or whatever.
Yeah. He asks her what she was doing. She says, like, that's not a dignified question.
Right. So we also in previous episodes, we know that Annie is living on her own, and she's kind of living in a really sketchy
like a
neighborhood,
apartment,
in a bad apartment, exactly. And there was a previous episode where they were painting her new apartment, and the window wouldn't open, and so they passed out, or she passed out, and Pierce
I've lived
found
in
her.
places like that.
So we know from previous episodes that she kind of lives in this sketchy place. So while Britta's in the bathroom and Abed gets up to go do something and then winds up near the bathroom door to talk to Britta later, Troy and Jeff and Pierce are still sitting around the table. The buzzer goes off for Shirley's pies. She gets up to go to the kitchen, and then Troy is like somehow looks in Annie's purse for something and is like, what does a pregnancy test look like? Jeff describes it and he goes, so then he picks it up and he's like, so this is definitely a gun, right?
It's a little pistol.
So we got Chekhov's gun in the first timeline, right? We see that in Annie's purse. And then Jeff stands up, hits his head. No, Pierce does not offer his present or he says, I have a present for you, but it doesn't get open.
What Pierce does offer is his anecdote about banging Eartha Kitt in the airplane
single
bathroom.
time.
This is one of my favorite aspects of this. I know that, Chevy Chase was famously not everybody's favorite part of the show, but he, the first time somebody mentions something about whatever
anything,
it is.
Literally anything. And he'll be like, you know what I don't like? Airplanes. Except for that one time I banged Eartha Kitt in the airplane.
He goes, that reminds me of the time I banged Eartha Kitt. And then, they say something and he goes, it's not name dropping if it comes up organically. And then it's very clever how in each scenario, there's a different conversation topic that takes him to this Eartha Kitt story until the last one where somebody says something about an airplane bathroom. And he's like, airplane bathroom. And then he doesn't get to tell it for whatever reason.
Yes, exactly. So now, so that's all 2. Yeah. The die has rolled. We're at the end of 2. Somebody usually says, I wonder what the pizza arrives. And somebody usually says, I wonder what happened in the other timelines. And then we go back to that little CGI thing of the die rolling, or of Jeff rolling the die. And then it flips to that.
It pretty much always ends with Abed going, gee, I wonder what happened in the other timeline. And then we flash back to Abed saying, now, Jeff, you're going to create different timelines. And we see again and again that graphic of the dice going up into the CGI kaleidoscope thing. And we get, look, I don't know if you want to enumerate these one by one. Like they're all pretty similar. This is not a like a My Two Dads thing where we're seeing vastly different.
We find out
we're
different
seeing little
pieces,
wrinkles.
right? We find out different pieces of information of backstory in each one. So the next number that's rolled is a 4. That's Shirley. Shirley goes to get the pizza, and then that's when we find out that everyone has decided, they've made a pact that they're not going to eat any more of Shirley's baking because she has decided that baking is her personality. And so then later, this is also when we get the Norwegian troll reveal as the present, right? Yeah. So they have a little conversation after Shirley goes to get the pizza. We get Roxanne again. Britta goes to the bathroom again. And now all the people that are left at the table are talking about Shirley's baking problem. She said, hey, make sure when the timer goes off, you guys get my pies out of the oven. And then, and they're like, we're not eating those pies, right, to each other. Then Pierce gives his gift to Troy. And we're reminded that until recently, Troy lived with Pierce. And what was one of the things that was sitting right outside his bedroom was this creepy Norwegian troll. And Pierce knows that it freaked Troy out. And he's jealous that Troy is now living with Abed and happy. And so he's giving him this troll to upset him as like a mean gift, as like a backhanded gift. So Troy opens it. He starts screaming. They're like, I hate it. He watches me sleep. Then the smoke alarm goes off because the pies are burning. Shirley comes back in and she's all mad. And they tell her, Shirley, you're not allowed to have baking as an identity. And then she says, it's hard being the old married lady hanging out with all of you guys because you're all making googly eyes at each other, which we haven't seen any evidence of that yet, but we will in the later roles.
Well, we've seen evidence of it in general.
Previous
and that
episodes,
these are young, just like she's saying, these are young single people. We're watching the show for romantic drama and stuff.
Oh, and I forgot the thing we haven't talked about that happens before any of the roles happen is that Abed shows off his scale model of the Raiders of the Lost Ark ball scene.
Ball thing. Yeah.
And in this one, the ball gets bumped when somebody gets upset, like Shirley gets upset and runs and slams a door or something, and the ball comes and starts coming down the ramp, and he catches it and resets it. So that sets up a little like, oh, that ball can just like go anywhere on its own if something gets bumped.
Yeah. All right, so keep going.
Okay,
What are
so
our
then the next one is the next die that is rolled is a 3, and this time it's Pierce. He goes to get the pizza. They all tease Troy for being a little baby man. Everybody, Jeff and Annie, are sitting there teasing him, and Troy gets upset, and he goes off to the bathroom. Right. And Britta's like, "I'm washing my hands, and he goes in anyway, catches her smoking.
Yeah, he goes in. He's like, I think I can handle, you're smoking a joint.
I'm 21 years old. Yes, I know what you're doing.
I'm an adult. He takes out like a fancy old-timey cigarette case.
Yes.
And Britta's like, oh, okay, all right, I see
She goes to light his cigarette.
Yeah, and then he sucks it into his mouth because it's a candy cigarette.
Exactly. So. But then we have a nice little moment here where Troy and Britta kind of hit it off, and this is the planting of the seed. They date later in this season, or maybe in season 4. They date for a while, and so this kind of plants the seed that the two of them might have a little something in common. So they come back out of the bathroom after having been all like, oh, cutesy together, and this is also the one where Jeff and Annie, they don't, this one isn't the one where they kiss, but this is the one where they end up in the kitchen multiple times, but they get the closest to kissing in this one than the other.
A lot of times they go into the kitchen and we don't see. So I kind of got the impression this exchange maybe happened in several of the timelines, and it's just showing us.
Yeah.
Because it's doing like a good, movie or show like this, even as it's showing you all of these different timelines, it's also for us, the viewer, providing a sort of linear story of, these different dialogue scenes. And this is where this just creeps me out. Like, I have no idea how far apart in age these people are, and I feel like
he's supposed to be like 35 or something, and she's supposed to be like 19, 20, or he's supposed to be like 32, and she's like, at this point, she and Troy are the same age. They graduated high school together, so she's supposed to be 21 at this point.
Yeah, it's 20. Like whatever the numbers are, it's like he's an adult who went off and had a legal career and then had to go back to college for whatever
lied about his
and she
degree.
is just like a normal undergrad. So it just always plays to me as like he is an adult and she is a college kid.
Yeah, and I really like the way the show continually handles it, because they also are creeped out by it, but there is this little undeniable kind of chemistry and like feelings between them that are, confusing for both of them. So anyway, so this one I have Troy and Britta bond. We get the Britta is smoking pot reveal. Abed catches the Raiders ball again. And then they go on to the next one and we get the 6 is rolled, and that's Britta. So she goes to get the pizza. Jeff and Annie, because Britta's not in the bathroom in this one, when Jeff stands up and hits his head, Jeff and Annie go to the bathroom and she takes care of him in the bathroom. Then this time they open the gift. So like Troy opens the gift again and he immediately starts screaming and they're arguing, and Jeff and Annie come back out of the bathroom to them, like, to Pierce and Troy. Pierce is like holding the troll in Troy's face and he's like, just look at him, he loves you, and all this. And then Britta walks back in with the pizza guy and is like, this is the pizza guy. His name's Toby, we're in love, and we're gonna get married. That was her boyfriend at the time in real life, which I thought was kind of cute. But so that's the end of that one. And then this one is the longer one, right?
Well, this is the one where it ends with all the calamities, right?
This is the darkest timeline. So a number 1 gets rolled and Troy goes to get the pizza. So as Troy walks out, the door slams behind him and the Raiders ball goes, right? No one notices the Raiders ball this time. So Jeff stands up, bangs his head. Annie stands up and is like, oh, let me help you. As she's walking over to him, she steps on the ball that is now rolling across the floor. She trips, she flips over, lands on the coffee table. The coffee table flips up in the air. The illegal bottle of Serbian rum shatters on the ground. Serbian booze is everywhere. The gun goes off because she's carrying it in her bag.
If you've ever seen a Final Destination movie where people get killed by like slipping on a bath mat and then somehow like their TV antenna impales their eyeball or something, like this is a scenario like that.
So as she's falling, she lands, and with the impact, the gun goes off. It shoots Pierce in the leg and hits the big artery that's there in his leg, and so there's blood just like spurting out of his leg. And then Britta comes out of the bathroom with the joint in her mouth, and she mouth goes agog, and it falls into the Serbian rum, and then the whole place is on fire. And then Troy comes back in with the pizza and sees the troll doll sitting there in the flames. And he's like, oh my God, what's happening? Oh my God. And that's the end of that timeline, or so we think. We get a call back to it at the end.
Right. So that one just descends into total chaos.
Yes.
And then does that just leave us with the final one where Abed catches the dice, or is there more? Okay.
We have two more. We have 5. We haven't rolled a 5 yet, right? And then we also have the 7th timeline where Abed
Let's go through them briskly.
What? Are you just because you didn't pay attention to what was happening?
All right. So what's the next one?
So when a 5 is rolled, that's Abed. Abed goes to get the pizza. Jeff gives him money, and then that means Britta doesn't get caught in the bathroom by anybody. Shirley goes to find Britta with the pies because nobody wants any pies. And Britta has come out from the bathroom now super high and is like, yeah, I want to eat this. And then she reveals, oh, we're not supposed to eat any of your pies.
Right.
I just am eating it because I'm high. And so then she and Shirley start arguing about that. She's like, well, I don't want you to eat my pies. I don't want to give my pies to a drug addict. And Britta's like, well, we aren't supposed to eat your pies anyway because baking isn't a personality. And so they're arguing. This is the one where Pierce says, you know what? You don't need to open this present, Troy, and realizes that he's being petty and decides not to give Troy
this
the troll.
This is like Malcolm's brother deciding not to spit his soda in the girl's face as a funny joke.
Exactly. So they're like fighting over the present, and Troy's like, no, let me open it. It looks fun. And Pierce is like, no, it's not a good idea. And then Jeff and Annie are in the kitchen. This is the one where they do kiss. And then Annie kind of was like, oh, it's so interesting. Like after they kiss, what you said right before we kissed kind of reminded me of what my dad used to say to me. And then Jeff gets all ooged out and he's like, hot tip, don't talk about your dad when you're kissing somebody.
Yeah, he goes, here's a makeout tip. I'm like, shut up. Maybe if she wasn't 15 years younger than you, she would be a little more on the same page about how to make out.
So they kind of get in a little bit of a tiff about that because Jeff's sort of put out and Annie's kind of ooged out, and they both sort of realize like, oh, this isn't really what we like. And then, and so then they all are fighting and Abed comes back in and he's happy as can be. He's eating the pizza and he's like, oh, I wonder what happened in the other timelines, but I hope this one's the real one because I found a nickel in the hallway. And then zoom, we go back to the beginning again, and this time Abed catches Jeff's hand and he says, wait a minute. You've devised a system in which you never have to go get pizza. There are 7 of us. You said there's 6 of us. There's 6 of us, but you're number 7. And so then they all are like, Jeff, you're such a bad guy. You're so conniving. Of course you would try not to be, have to go get the pizza. And what a jerk. Okay. No dice is thrown. They take the die away from him. They say, you got to go get the pizza. Nobody's giving you any money. Get out the door. And so he stands up, he hits his head. They all collectively laugh at him because it's karma. And then Roxanne comes on, and instead of Jeff being there to say no, Britta sings it, and Shirley is stopped on her way to the kitchen to get the pies because she is like, oh, yeah, I love that song. And she starts singing. And then Annie gets up and the 3 girls are all dancing. And then the boys are like, oh, that's really funny. Let's all dance too. So everybody's up and dancing. And Pierce throws away the troll present. And Jeff comes back in and he sees them all and he's like, ugh. But then he goes and grabs a piece of pizza and just eats the cheese off of it because he doesn't have carbs, obvi. And then Abed says to Annie, hey, you know what? Or Annie goes, this is a really nice place, you guys, a great party. And Abed's like, yeah, you should move in here. And that is what eventually happens because she's got to get out of her crazy apartment. So that
cements us as that tells us this is the one that we're going to continue to follow for the
exactly.
For the show.
This is now the prime timeline where they catch Jeff and he doesn't roll the dice. Whereas number 1, when he rolled a 1, that's the darkest timeline.
So before we get to that little epilogue with the evil version, we get at some point in that ending sequence you just described, Abed gives this little speech. I think maybe when he first catches the die, or at some point, he kind of says, like we've sort of been saying throughout the show, like we all have these traits. Jeff is going to be a conniving SOB no matter what, and so on and so on. And so he's almost sort of putting forth this hypothesis of like, yeah, maybe despite all of the intricacies of the different timelines, there's like a certain sort of core truth that prevails. Right. And then we get that fun little tag where we see they're back in the study center or the library or whatever, but this is the outgrowth of that timeline where explain the various things that have taken place.
So Pierce has been shot. He eventually bled out and he's dead. Yeah. Shirley is a drunk because she let her pies burn and watched her friends die, or her friend die. Britta has a blue streak in her hair. Annie's locked away in a mental ward because she couldn't save Pierce. Troy lost his larynx somehow, like trying to put out the fire and also screaming at the troll. Yeah. Jeff lost his arm in the melee, and Abed is just sitting there cutting out fake goatees from felt.
Right. This is a little bit like the Back to the Future 2 middle part where just everything has gone to hell.
Yes.
And oh, my dad died and Biff took over the town.
Right.
And yeah,
we're living in the Biff timeline here.
The way they've done up Joel McHale is very funny. Like, besides him just missing an arm, he's all like pale and just like he's got this like snarl on his face where he just really sells like this is like the horrible
worst
version
thing
of
ever.
him. And yeah, it's very funny when Abed hands out the fake, little goatees. And says,
he's like the mission is clear. We must return to the prime timeline and kill our opposite selves and restore ourselves to the good timeline.
Yeah. I'll also shout out the movie Coherence. This was reminding me of that. That's a very fun sort of alternate timeline type thing. This reminded me of that. But yeah, the idea that Abed takes all of his cues from movies and TV. It's just so funny that like, oh, so a goatee, of course. Like, I can't think offhand of the examples, but of course that is the thing. You
like
put the person
bad.
in a goatee to signify that this is the evil version of them.
Yep.
And so, yeah, this is another one in a sense.
And then there's a tag on the tag, right? Because they have regular Troy and Abed back in their apartment watching Inspector Spacetime, and Troy senses a disturbance. Abed senses a disturbance in the universe, and he doesn't know, but he somehow knows that like evil Abed is coming for him.
Yeah, and I have to say I don't remember how this plays out in the rest of the series.
Many times we get crossovers. There's even an episode, I think, where evil Abed is able to infiltrate through the Dreamatorium.
Yeah.
He's able to take over. He knocks out regular Abed and like comes into the prime timeline and starts creating chaos. There's another time where he's able to bring in, like during one of the battle shows that we'll eventually get to, he's able to bring in some of the bad, like bad Jeff and evil Jeff and evil Annie.
Yeah.
And I think those are the two that he brings over, and it's during one of the warfare episodes, so everything's already in chaos, so they're able to kind of infiltrate then.
I can only imagine some dark eyeliner is involved.
Yes, and by that time they've all grown their fake they don't have to wear the felt goatees anymore. Right. There's also another one at some point where they like make fun of Troy for not being able to grow a goatee or something, so he's like still wearing his felt one later on. I feel like that's a joke that happens later on. Anyway, this is also this is tied for the highest rated episode of Community ever. Like, it really is just such a fun episode. And the thing that I love about it is that what they do is that with each subsequent roll of the die, they drop in a little bit more of the story that we need to know.
And they just like a lot of these sort of deja vu type things, they truncate the parts that we're familiar with a little bit more and more. So it gets more and more Pavlovian. Okay, here's where he hits his head. Here's where she goes to the bathroom. But yeah, they make it more and more economical so that they can start introducing, these new story elements. And like I said before, you still have that same basic flow of like, oh, now we're going to stop and have a dialogue scene between Jeff and Alison Brie or whatever, even though it's doing this like, obviously this is the most ambitious of all of the episodes in terms of just the mechanics of
and 7 different timelines, you know what I mean? And the fact that they're able to fit it all in and it doesn't feel chopped up, right? Like, that's the thing that I think is so great. Like what we talked about in the very first episode, in the My Two Dads episode, when it was like, okay, now we know we're at the point in the show where she's got to like have this realization. And the way they did it was like, they're arguing. I feel safe. Now everything's back to normal, kind of thing. And like, that was it. Whereas like, I feel like all the subsequent shows have done that a bit more masterfully and themselves only taken on 2 sort of parallel timelines or, 2 ideas of things that could have happened. And then this one's like, fuck you, we're doing 7.
Yeah, so what do we think? Looking back over these, I feel like, even as you were just saying that, my mind is abuzz with all the ways that these are similar or different. This very solid lineup. So what are you thinking in terms of best, worst, overall kind of trends, forecasts?
Oh, I mean, Remedial Chaos Theory is one of my all-time favorite episodes of TV, hands down. I love every minute of it. I just like this was so exciting for me to be able to just like talk about every piece of it, you know, for sure. Love it. I hadn't seen the Scrubs episode in a long time. They did a good job with it. I felt like it was really nostalgic for me to go back to the My Two Dads episode. And like you said, Stacey Keenan as a young actress really handled the emotional heft of like saying goodbye to her dead mom in her dream. That was really, like, I was tearing up. Like, I thought they did a good job with it. So yeah, and I had never seen that Malcolm in the Middle episode because I'm like you, I didn't watch that show. So that was really good. And I always love when I discover that I, you know, truly like another show. And I think that was fun too. So this, to me, this was like prime time lineup. This was so much fun to watch every bit of this, but obviously Remedial Chaos Theory will always be my favorite.
Nice. Yeah. It's funny that the My Two Dads is really the only one of these that kind of uses this alternate timeline thing vis-a-vis like your personal life choices, or in this case, it's not even like her life
her
choices,
mom's life
but
choices.
like your overall, the trajectory of your life. Because in some ways it is similar. It's also the only one that it's like a straight up dream, I guess. But so, yeah, that was really fun in that sitcom-y way of like, I mean, it's like one notch above Sesame Street. Where it's like, oh, this guy is wacky and this guy is serious. And oh, it turns out that you need a little bit of the yin and the yang, you know? And so, yeah, that was fun in that sort of old-timey retro sitcom-y way. But yeah, that, you know, the Scrubs one is pretty good, but because it's so much less ambitious to me than the Malcolm in the Middle or the Community, it almost like it's underwhelming by comparison.
Right.
You know?
It was a really good episode.
Yeah, I feel like if I were comparing it to other Scrubs episodes, I'd be like, oh, this is pretty cool. The way they rewound and showed you the same thing twice. But as it is, the Community episode is very, very solid for all the reasons you said. We watched all of Community together and I really liked it. You know, I was pleasantly surprised because I initially, at first blush, tuned out of Community for the specific reason of that first episode being all about Joel McHale lying to Gillian Anderson and making up this fake study group. And I was just like, I don't want to see a show about this 40-year-old dude macking on this college girl. And then it so quickly sort of changes courses. I do think, you know, there's something left over from the 20th century about this show being like, but we still need to have this straight white guy as the center of the show, right? We can't just have him be like one of the random pieces. And it works so much better when Jeff is just one of the random pieces and he can be the guy that's vain and vapid and he's not the center, and whatever is going on between him and one of these girls that's half his age is not the main story of the show.
Yeah, well, Britta is she's meant to be older as well. She's meant to only be like 5 years younger than him. But in real life, Alison Brie and Britta and Gillian Anderson are just a few months apart.
And again, it just reads as creepy. The whole thing of he's always lying and he's always like he's just a creepy character, which is fine if
what
you're small.
What you're speaking to, though, is exactly what happens in the prime timeline. He's the one that leaves, and that's the best timeline. When he gets out of the way, he gets called on his shenanigans for being manipulative, then he leaves and goes and gets the pizza, and everyone else has a great time, and then he comes back in, and he realizes, actually, you know, okay, maybe I'm not going to dance to Roxanne, and these people are all stupid, but I love them, so I'm going to hang out over here and eat pizza. And it's exactly like the show realized exactly what you are saying, that he needed to be one of the characters and not the main character in order for the show and for the group to be happy. Yeah,
exactly. Not, you know, it might work for Seinfeld to have the milquetoast guy be at the center of it and have the wacky people surrounding him. But yeah, in this case, to me, Joel McHale, it's not like toxic, but it's like he is definitely like last in terms of like what really makes this show fun for me, and that includes Chevy Chase.
It's so interesting because I see him doing Sam from Cheers in that. Like,
oh yeah,
that's
definitely.
I mean, he's doing it in a more like slimy, manipulative way, but like that's what he's going for.
Yeah, but that's the difference. Is Sam from Cheers didn't say like come to this bar, but in real life it was like his living room, and he was just lying to her. I don't know, but anyway, where I'm going is that like that episode is very, very fun, and just for all the reasons we said, it keeps repeating it and slightly changing in the way it gets into these sci-fi elements. But yeah, in terms of like the real embarrassment of riches that this lineup was, Malcolm in the Middle takes it for me because it didn't need the CGI transition. It was so clever in the way it taught you how to watch it, and really established itself so sort of quietly and effortlessly of like, yeah, like you get it. Like it just had so much respect for the audience of like, you're going to figure out how this weird back and forth timeline thing works, and we're going to have fun with it and do all these trippy transitions. And what they actually did with it story wise was so ingenious about the brother and his stupid joke and the dad and his perfect game, and all of that really was kind of a joy. And so, yeah, all very solid, especially the community. But to me, the Malcolm in the Middle was the most unexpected sort of like thrill of all this.
For sure. I mean, for me too, just because it was not one I had seen before. I'd seen all the other episodes except for that one. So, I mean, not recently, but So in another timeline, an alternate version of yourself, Jay, which one of these shows do you pick?
One of the other ones. I mean, I guess there's four.
There's four different versions.
Yeah,
where you
our
like
lives. Yeah,
where you like Stacey Keenan the best.
Yeah, there's only four versions of my life in my multiverse. It's the podcast I recorded on March 16th, and the four different shows we watched, whichever one I liked best. Well, in our prime timeline, what are we talking about next week?
So normally this is when I say next week we're doing. I will not be saying that this time because we are not going skydiving. There will be no skydiving ever for me. We will talk about skydiving. So next week, all of the people on our shows that we will watch will be doing some skydiving, and I will be terrified the entire time. We are watching ALF, Season 1, Episode 9, Miller Goes Skydiving, Herman's Head, Season 1, Episode 16, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Dying, Saved by the Bell, The College Years, Season 1, also Episode 16, Love and Death, and The Neighborhood, Season 2, Episode 19, Welcome to the Jump. Do you see how many of these have dying in them?
Yeah. Skydiving's next week, and until then, we will consider this segment of the sitcom study concluded. Thank you for listening to the Sitcom Study. Tell us what you think or share your own TV tropes and topic ideas by sending a self-addressed stamped email to sitcomstudypodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you like the show, consider leaving a rating or review on your podcast app. It helps us boost those precious Nielsen ratings. The Sitcom Study is recorded in front of a live studio dog.